Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have John Moore here, and of course from the last half hour we have Tim holding over for a little while. John, give us the latest updates of what you hear. The first and the most hot stories are basically a combination of conflicts. We have the Gaza invasion to North Gaza. They've not gone into Gaza City. As we analyze the military hardware, these tanks that the Israelis are moving into Gaza City are going to be sitting ducks, so the Israelis are going to lose. Mr. Gilad Atzmon, who happens to be Hebrew and Israeli, and understands, he writes honest articles in Rents.com, he's done an analysis that Israel's going to lose again. They cannot go in there with their current weapon systems and expect to get out and do well. And they're certainly not, they're going to be defeated again like they were in South Lebanon about 5 years ago. The next thing is the argument that somehow a missile was fired from the ground can easily be gotten rid of, a BUK missile, if they have the radar tapes, and if they have the communication with the aircraft from Kiev or other ground-based stations that would have communicated with this airliner as MH17 from Malaysia. It also was off course. On July 8th, both the Kiev government and the rebel government had closed off that airspace. So why was it in that area? Because all the previous flights for the MH17 or the previous flights from Malaysia didn't go into that airspace. What we have now is a situation where if you can get the radar tapes and show it wasn't a ground-based missile, it's either a bomb on the plane or an air-to-air missile. That's it. Because that plane, the 777, has had a stellar record. It doesn't have blowing up, fuel tanks. It doesn't have electrical wiring that explodes. It doesn't have mechanical problems. So the chances that a Malaysian airline, and by the way, these airliners in Indonesia and these other countries are very well serviced. So they don't fly apart. You don't have rivets popping off and wings falling off and other things. So I don't buy the argument. I think that the evidence is that Obama did the attack against Russia's economy, which freaked out the Europeans because they know it's going to, although there aren't a lot of teeth in it, some of the measures he has does have some teeth that in great measure will cause the Russians to either raise the price of oil and gas tremendously, which will hurt Europeans, or if it amps up, they're going to cut off supplies if this gets worse, which means it's going to kill the European and the world economy. I think that you got a good argument there, Tim. But John, tell me what you've seen and you hear, because we have Israel going crazy, trying to go into Gaza City, figuring they're going to fix this thing, and it's not. You have statements by Ayelet Sheheb, the Israeli member of parliament of the Knesset, who made insane statements literally yesterday that all Palestinian women should be killed. And this is published up in Veterans Today. I mean, this goes on and on. The behavior of Israel is like an out-of-control rabid animal. And, of course, they're tied directly to America. I'm sure the Joint Chiefs of Staff lose sleep at night because they can't control Israel. They don't know what they're going to do next.
No, you can't control those people. There's no way. Well, Doctor, I have an update from a private trusted source out in the Fort Carson, Colorado area that at least one Russian Antonov transport aircraft has been seen circling the airport out there. The Antonov being, as far as I know, the largest operational transport plane on the planet, slightly larger than our C-5 Galaxy.
Right.
And they've been here before, the Anatovs, on various missions and assignments, but along with everything else we're hearing about UN troops and Russians and so forth, I find it alarming that a Russian transport that can easily hold 400 plus troops and all their personal equipment would be at Fort Carson, where all this began. It was 3 years ago this spring that the first Russian troops started arriving at Fort Carson, and now, of course, they're all over the United States. Estimates from my sources say 80 to 85,000 Russian Spetsnaz dispersed around the United States, and those are conservative numbers. We're seeing a merging of the two, and in my opinion, treason on the part of our military officers who are putting up with this, clear and present danger to our national security. And I agree with you, Doctor. The Israelis cannot be controlled. They're for a elected official, a member of the Knesset, I believe you said, to make statements like that. for a taxi cab driver to do it, it would be irresponsible. But for a member of the Knesset to say that is off the charts crazy. You just can't.
Well, at the very least, she should be in a psychiatric hospital. At the least, and probably she should be arrested and removed from Parliament. I mean, it should be a process of removing her from making statements like that, because you're making a statement. Yeah, yes, let's say yes, there's terrorism, yes, and so on, but there's ways of dealing with terrorism. I personally think that Israel should be annexed by America, and we should not only restrain the Israelis from using their weapons, but they've also been industrial espionage experts stealing our secrets and handing them off to Russia and China and other countries. Israel's not been an ally, and right now their plans to go and bomb the Bashar nuclear reactor with heavy lift bombers, tankers that we've loaned them, and actually even these large bunker buster nukes that can actually penetrate through into Qom and Iran and their centrifuge systems and to destroy the Bashar reactor. This is craziness on the part of Obama, and why do the Joint Chiefs of Staff tolerate this?
Well,
why do they do this?
Question. A friend of mine was getting ready to interact in a business venture with some Israelis, and he was warned by the FBI personally that if the Israelis don't steal everything you've got, they will be humiliated. That's their attitude. They think it's their right, and if they can't steal your proprietary trade secrets, they feel humiliated that they weren't able to pull that off.
Right. Now, here's what happens is the thuggish attitude of Israel is going to get them all killed. And I think it's going to actually bring on the tribulation, because it says in the Bible 1/3 of Jews which, by the way, are all apostate right now. I know that a lot of people feel insulted by that. But we not only have an apostate religion in Islam, we have pretty well the entire population except the Messianic Hebrew believers that actually became Messianic Christians. They're all apostate. They believe in the Zohar, the Talmud of the Babylonian Talmud. These are just demonic documents. They believe that rabbis God consults the rabbis when he has difficult things he can't figure out. People have to understand that actual belief systems, what they believe in, is that the rest of humanity is soulless dogs and we're inferior. How can you negotiate with somebody that takes that viewpoint toward Palestinians, which is why this one, Ayelet Shahed, they made the statement, she looks with a blank face like, I'm just a baby-faced MP telling you they're dogs and we just need to kill the dogs. What's the problem? And she has this kind of look on her face like, it's a matter of fact. And I'm thinking, this is what this woman as a little girl was raised into. She doesn't know any better. She's basically been damaged psychologically and spiritually by living in a culture that's plainly demonic, which is Israel. Israel is not ancient Hebrew. It's not even the state of Israel. It should be called Rothschild land. As I tell people, God's going to make them repent, and I don't believe in partitioning the land, but it should be basically a country like America where it is can allow Christians and Jews, and it can allow moderate Muslims, but the Muslims have to actually get their act together. We don't hear any Muslims talking about their extreme elements. As far as I'm concerned, we should stop allowing immigration of Muslims to America, because Islam basically has not spoke up and said, there are elements within our religion that are clearly blowing up airliners and terrorists, which is why the globalists love them, because they want to make them the boogeyman. And of course, once they're finished with the boogeyman, they're going to make certain that most of the Muslims in the world are going to end up dead. I mean, the people there that think they're getting powered by making alliances with the globalists, they're crazy. They don't understand. They're making a deal with the devil, and that deal has got an endpoint that's not going to be pleasant.
Absolutely, Doctor. Well, you and I and Tim and Ann, we're not going to change what's going on in the Middle East. All we can do is make ourselves aware, educate ourselves, and prepare to mitigate personally with sheltering in place, for example, if we need to, and defending our homes from whatever might come our way. And it's interesting and fascinating to observe these matters and prognosticate. But when it comes down to it, gentlemen and ladies, we need to take care of those we care about and let these crazy people over there kill each other if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah, we need to get more out of it, though. We have to also be ready for the fact that at least temporarily, they're planning on crashing the economy. Gold will take off like it's already starting to take off since this crisis. That food is going to get very, very short because we're going to have a famine strike us by the fall. That the globalists want to have engaged Europe in a major conflict with Russia, and they're freaked out by it. And we're joined with Ann Morrison. got some updates on Ebola in West Africa. You've got updates perhaps on Earth changes, the actual sunspot. I got my spaceweather.com site. That apparently the sunspot activity's dropped to 0, which is really unusual. In fact, what I hear is that when sunspot activity drops to 0, there's a very much more likelihood of a major solar explosion, a coronal mass ejection, or some other event. We're also seeing that... Go ahead.
They'll be watching for a corona hole on the sun. A corona hole can also send out a CME. Or you can get a flare without a sunspot. You don't need a
exactly, you don't need sunspot activity. In fact, they say it's more likely to actually have solar storms. The other thing is the magnetic field of the Earth. The latest reports have been coming out now are saying that the magnetic field of the Earth is dropping at 5% per decade, not 5% per century. So the rate at which it's deteriorating is happening faster. We know Fukushima, as well as nanoparticles from geoengineering the climate, are chewing away at the ultraviolet protecting magnetosphere and the ozone layer, which is going quickly. Lots of things are happening. But what's your latest update, Ann?
Well, it's possible that the Ivory Coast Ebola virus has been in West Africa for up to since 2006. They are finding it in blood samples that were collected for a different reason, but there haven't been fatalities. So something happened to those Ivory Coast Ebola virus to make it weaponized. That is, to make the incubation period 3 weeks.
This is right after USAMRIID, which is the U.S. Army Infectious Disease Research Unit, arrived there.
Yeah,
in 2006.
They were there in 2006 to study another tropical disease because we were sending soldiers into that area, and they wanted to protect the soldiers. I mean, that's their job, is to find out what viruses are there and then to analyze them and either make a vaccine or make it possible for the U.S. Army to send its soldiers in. Well, when they got through with their analysis and their job on that particular tropical disease, then they went back and they started analyzing the blood samples for other viruses, and they discovered that they had Ebola virus, what they called Ivory Coast Ebola virus. Now, the strange thing is nobody was dying from it. There were no reports of death from this Ivory Coast Ebola virus. But now, let's see, 8 years later, now suddenly we have a weaponized Ebola virus that is coming out of Guinea and Sierra Leone and it's Liberia. And what's happening is that the incubation period has gone from 5 days to 21 days to 3 weeks, and it kills in the last 2 days. In other words, when you start getting a bad headache and bloody diarrhea, you've only got 2 days to live. Now, how does that affect the United States? Well, I don't know if you've been watching the news, but the CDC, Tom Frieden, who's the top dog at the CDC, has been grilled by the House of Representatives, the subcommittee of the House of Representatives, because the CDC labs have been caught doing sloppy work in transferring what you would call Biosafety Lab 4 pathogens to Biosafety Lab 2 laboratories. And so he's been, the congressmen have just been reaming him one way or the other, and one of them said, they said the CDC can't do anything. We can't trust them to identify MERS coronavirus. They can't identify Ebola, and they can't identify tuberculosis, multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. So Tom Frieden then responded. He says, well, we've shut down the CDC, and it's not working. We've shut down all the labs until we get a handle on the safety culture, and he's blaming the safety culture. Well, one of the representatives said, these guys have PhDs, and we're paying them big salaries, and the CDC has been the gold standard around the world for processing and identifying virus, and it's not working. And so we're going to, the CDC is no longer the gold standard. They're turning. The gold is rusty now, so the gold standard is gone. They're shutting down the laboratories. They're shutting down what they were doing until they get a hand on safety. Now, I know PhDs who work with viruses, and they're just like any other people. Some of them are safety-minded, and some of them aren't. What you have to do is you have to do what the airlines did. The airlines set up a safety culture that was independent of the flight or the flight crew, and it reported only to the president of the airline. And that, has kept our aircraft safe from falling out of the sky. I mean, we have an excellent safety record on flights, domestic flights and international flights. And unless you implement that paradigm in the biosafety world, you're not going to, these PhDs, they may or may not know how to safely handle these viruses.
Well, they're sloppy. I remember when I first, back in 1972, went into the laboratory in a scintillation counter room. This was at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, sister university of Harvard. And I was told that the room was a little bit dirty, so I walked in with my radiation detector, and it was like jumping off the scale. So we had to spend days cleaning it up so we could actually use the scintillation counter to detect if we were creating certain radioisotope labeled, like phosphorus or carbon labeled molecules we were synthesizing in the lab to use as a substrate for our bacteria to look for enzymes. And it's like everything. People are sloppy. They discovered all these different viruses. Now, some of it's sloppiness on purpose, and other it's just because people are sloppy. For example, there was a chain link lock on the fence around the biosafety laboratory when Katrina hit back years ago in New Orleans. And this is like, I think, a BSL 3 or 4 lab, which should not have ever had specimens where you could literally take a bolt cutter and walk into the laboratory and just kind of grab a specimen of something really dangerous. But it was right there. So, never assume that the government has competent people or that universities have competent people or people, they get lax. You think, just like we're working on radioisotopes, you think, well, I can't see it, so it's not killing me. Even though they know intellectually they're working around gamma radiators or, neutron flux radiators are going to kill them, they act like it's nothing.
Well, that's because they're around them all the time, and just because, if you... Well,
it's a psychological thing. They know the difference intellectually, but emotionally they don't change their behavior. And
a PhD knows a lot about a little. It doesn't know a little about a lot.
Right.
They know their field, and they're very necessary, but you can't trust them to take care of business.
I want to change gears just a little bit. I want to ask questions. We have all these converging things, Ann and John, and I'd like to hear your opinions on it. I think the evidence is pretty solid that Russia's not going to admit that they got an attack by Israel. There's nothing to be gained by that. But all the evidence points to the fact there was an attempted assassination with a new world economy being set up by the BRICS nations and Russia just returning from the World Cup and the BRICS nations meeting. We have spreading plagues. Welcome back. And so, John and Ann, as I was saying before, the question was, what does all this mean? We have just a checklist of a few things. Firstly, Obama made the fire across the bow that he's going to do all kinds of sanctions against Russia. Most of them don't have any teeth. A couple of them could have teeth. At the same time, we have the BRICS nations this week making a plan with $100 billion down payment to set up a new IMF World Bank. We have the spread of Ebola in West Africa. We have the sun getting really quiet, which means it could be a big solar storm. We have the world economy really teetering, and the Europeans freaked out that Obama did this. We have this missile, they think, or bomb that caused the air flight to go over eastern Ukraine to blow up. The story I think is most probable, again, remember it's all probabilities, is that it was an attempt to kill Putin, and you have to throw the other ones out because of several reasons. Firstly, you have a radar system on the front of these BUK missiles, which the Russian rebels had, but they didn't have a general radar system, integrated radar system to actually prosecute and hit an airliner or any jet at 33,000 feet, which has never been done, by the way. Number two, I can't even see, even though it's a stretch, I can't see the Kiev government thinking it's a good positive thing. Even Joel Skousen says, well, it doesn't make sense that even Kiev and Poroshenko would do this. What the evidence, and the reason why the Russians would deny it is because they'd have to actually do some kind of response against Israel that would be pretty horrendous if there was an attack by Israel with an Azerbaijani F-15 refurbished by America to be souped up, shooting down with an air-to-air heat-seeking laser-guided missile to hit that airliner. Thinking it's a Russian transport, which, by the way, has radar blocking and other systems, so you got to get up pretty close. Close enough you may not be able to tell the difference. And occurring at the same time, he's coming back from the BRICS in the World Cup, which means they were trying to set up an alternative world system. And Mr. Putin's had, I think, 7 or 8, I'm not sure of the number, previous attempts in the last 3 years to kill him. So what do you think happens to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi? They try to set up alternative financial systems in the Middle East against America and the petrodollar, and that got them killed. So when you just put the logic together and the anomalies, it's a real stretch to think that the eastern people of Donetsk and Kirkuk or these other nations are actually doing anything. And then it's a stretch to think that even the Kiev government thinks there's anything to be gained by trying to blame these people, they call them terrorists, in these other areas. But by the way, if they're going to hold a general election, they have to invite the terrorists to actually vote, which they don't have yet. So I think it's really unlikely. I think the most likely story that fits is if they didn't find debris of a BUK, if they find the radar signature recording shows that there was no ground-launched missile, it was either a bomb placed on the plane, and by the way, its last place where it took off before it was blown up was in the Netherlands, and the security company handling all cargo, etc., all security was an Israeli company. So if there's a bomb on the plane, it's Israeli. If it's an F-15 from Azerbaijan, as the report was that there were actually reports on the ground right before it happened, as it was happening, that there was a F-15 like a double twin tail jet in the air that shot a missile at the jet, at that commercial airliner. That's the reports that came in first before they started spinning the story and messing it up. So I think we had an attempt on Putin, and I don't think Putin's going to forget it, even though they're spinning the story, and RT and these other agencies are not going to admit that Russia, they attempted to kill the president of Russia. And I think it shows just how serious the bankers are, how serious they are to prosecute war, and how serious they are to bring down the whole world economy just because they can't have their way. Ed and John, your comments, because I think things are going to get real dicey now. And this is the firing shot, just like the shooting of the Archduke Ferdinand. They did it for several attempts before they succeeded. Maybe they'll try again to try to kill Putin. But I think this is very, very bad.
Well, I agree, Doctor. Shooting down an aircraft of that, like was done, is an act of war, clear and simple, regardless of who did it. We may never know who was responsible for shooting this down. As we frequently say, the first casualty of war is truth. But look at who stands to gain. There's one of my listeners this morning told me that there was a large sell-off of that Malaysian airline stock the day before the shoot-down, which may have some evidence there to look at who was doing the sale. We're in a very tenuous situation in terms of the possibility of World War III starting. Wars have been started over far less. Shooting a rather obscure Archduke in, what was it, 1914, when that happened? Right. Who would have guessed? The guy that did the shooting didn't have a clue that he was starting a world war. But all the chess players were in place in 1914. Everybody was cocked and locked and ready to go, and off we go to war. And we're certainly cocked and locked now in every sense of the word. And there's a high likelihood that if World War III was to start, and in hindsight, we may already be in World War III. We may very well have our president, our commander-in-chief, not make the right decisions so that we would, in fact, lose.
Right. In fact, he's already, as you said, already brought Russian soldiers on American soil. There's been double and triple agreements going on to train and control 1.2 to 1.4 million foreign troops on American soil, including Chinese, Mongolian, etc., trained with American weapons and tactics on American soil for the past 40 years plus. This is insanity. It's happening. I have no idea why it's being done. It doesn't make any financial or other sense to me. We know when we give access to security control by Israel, they're going to pass all our secrets on to the Chinese and Russians. It's not a security leak, it's a pipeline. And People may find this a shock, especially those that believe the foolishness of many Christian ministers and Messianic ministers that Israel is our ally and we should never, we should always stand by Israel. Yeah, we should stand by Israel, make them a state, annex their country, get total control of their military because their Joint Chiefs of Staff don't sleep at night because Israel is out of control. And I believe we should strip the weapons from these surrounding countries, but we could do it with our Delta Force and our space-based weapons and other things. We could do it through negotiations and financial things. But we don't need to tolerate surrounding Muslim nations having 200,000 missiles aimed at Israel. If it was the 51st state, would we tolerate 200,000 missiles facing toward, let's say, Southern California? I don't think so. So let's get real here. On the other hand, I don't think the Israelis think that their silly policy of going into Gaza City is a good idea. They're just going to get another stupid defeat. And I think that's what the danger here is. I don't know who we lost, John or Ann. Ann, are you there? I think we may have lost. Ann, are you there too?
Doc. I'm still here, Doc.
I think we'll have to re-get Ann if we can. Ben, see if we can connect to Ann. So what do you think, John? I mean, I think that by the fall, this is my guess, I think we're going to have a major correction in the economy. I can't tell how bad it's going to be. I think we're going to see the signs of famine, actual food shortages show up. We know the globalists are buying up all the water rights all over the place, and they're also, in a sense, using hydrofracking that's destroying the water table all across the country, but they're not recharging the water table like the Ogallala aquifer, which would happen if they brought NWAPA, North American Water and Power Project, from the Northwest. So everything that's happening is stupid. They're not improving the XL pipeline to bring the oil down from Canada and from the areas of North Dakota. They're making sure that we're still dependent on foreign oil. We're even exporting oil to other countries. We still have oil prices way higher than they should be when Obama came into office. America's foreign policy is insane. We're spending all kinds of money on stupid things and military hardware we don't need or shouldn't use, or it's not the most advantageous way to prosecute a war. And everything that Obama touches, he's just a rookie. He just doesn't have any competency in any zone whatsoever operating as president. And he's not even president. As even Hillary Clinton says, and I call her Hillary, but she's evil, but she has half a brain. She says he doesn't have his hand on the tiller of the boat of the nation. Obama is a fool. And the fact is he's got another 15-day vacation. Don't hear any points on his response. He's been on camera with a teleprompter as to what's happening while he's playing golf. It's crazy. So we come back, we'll hear your response, John, and Ann. We'll get her back. Come back, and we have a caller, and I'm just waiting for his question to pop up on our Skype line. When you call in, you need to tell our operator, and whether it's Randy during Monday to Thursday or Friday on Ben, tell him exactly what your question is, not just kind of general, or what your statement is. If it's point 1, 2, 3, just do that. That way we have an idea where we're going. And it was something to do with the MP, but we'll wait till we get the question up on the board. John, what do you think of the situation? I mean, I think that we are dangerously close to an economic nexus here. We're dangerously close to, in other words, a collapse. We're dangerously close to a Mideast war and a war in Ukraine where they're just trying their best to bring about World War III and to pull Putin into this mess. He's literally, for 3 times in the last 2 years, stopped World War III. And the fact that all the evidence points, and again, remember, it's not absolute, but all the evidence points to the fact that this is an attempted assassination of a world leader. It wasn't just a bunch of rebels misfiring a BUK missile for no stupid reason, but to just fire the dang thing off, which you know darn well, in order to target something like a commercial airliner at 33,000 feet traveling at 450, 500 miles an hour, you have to lock on with radar systems, which they didn't have. That's
a sophisticated weapon system that can do that. Yeah, nothing handheld. Handheld weapons cannot do that.
And by the way, even the BUK system, which is a radar on its own tip, you have to have a general radar system to be able to find them and then lock on them. I think all the alternative viewpoints just don't hold any weight. We have a question here from Santiago. You're wondering about if metal roofs will block EMPs. Go ahead, Santiago.
Yeah, John, you were talking about an EMP thing happening soon, and I was wondering if a metal roof, aluminum roof, would block.
Well, here's what you do with your metal roof. You attach a 8-gauge copper ground wire very securely with a nice, clean, tight contact to the metal on the roof, and then drive an 8-foot ground rod into the ground next to the building, and only do one. You only want to do one grounding wire. If you do two or more, you'll set up a circuit, a complete circuit, and that will get you in a place you want to be. Now, in addition, I've done this myself. I have a steel roof on my building. In addition, you want a Faraday cage inside the building as well. And it does not need to be grounded. In fact, you don't want it grounded. And that can be with just simple hardware store aluminum screen wire will achieve that goal. So and make sure that anything you're protecting is not connected to either an antenna or the power grid, because you compromise everything you're doing if your electronics are connected to either the power grid or an antenna. If you do those things, you'll be pretty safe.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, you can't connect them, otherwise you're going to... And what's interesting is the metal roofs a lot of people are putting metal roofs in. And I like that point you made, John, because we talked about this one of the previous Monday shows, that the single wire is important, or otherwise you form a circuit, and that's bad. And you get a lot of the materials, too, over at Less EMF as well, if you want to put mesh in your ceiling of the parts of your home that are not covered by a metal roof, if it's just over your garage.
Yeah, I've got a concrete house with rebar running in crisscross wiring. Crisscross in my house, all the way to 2 feet into the ground. So,
Sunday, I've got a totally unrelated question, because I know who you are calling.
Yeah.
Is the idea of sovereignty, and you've been involved with a sovereign organization. What is it called? Because I want to bring them on the air to talk about this a bit and raise the issue, because we're all sovereigns, and what's happened is when the original Constitution was formed, was basically the idea that we as sovereigns have the right to overthrow our government if the government's not representing our rights. We now have a government that operates through like the secret agencies as if they own us, and it's operational government by proxy, by rulemaking, and not even law. They don't even follow the laws that they make, either in immigration or anything else. So can you talk about what the name of the organization is and what it means?
Yeah, it's called HISadvocates.org. ADVOCATES.org. HISadvocates.org, and it's also a ministry.
Right, and of course, what we need to do is we need to get them on for a full program or a couple of segments, because we need to talk about this, because what's happening is there are people that are, getting alternative driver's licenses, getting off of state taxes. I think you recently were able to successfully do that in New Mexico, to get off state taxes. I think what people should understand is that the latest rulemaking that Obama did was, and John, you can answer to this, is apparently he ruled that AK-47s are now an illegal weapon in America, and by executive order, and that just happened, I think, on Wednesday.
Yeah. Actually, I think what happened, Doctor, is he made illegal financial transactions with the company that manufactures the AK-47. Is what actually happened, which is kind of clever, because it certainly goes around Congress, and over a period of time it would, of course, have some effect.
So how does it work? What happens there? Is it basically saying you can't bring in Russian-made material or anything like the AK-47 from Russia, but if it's somewhere like, I have out of state a similar type of device, which I can't bring into California, called a MAC-90. And MAC-90s basically aren't necessarily made in Russia, but they're much nicer weapon. And, of course, the whole situation, I think, is that who does the government think they are trying to control what weapons we carry?
Well, you let them.
It's none of their business, to be honest with you. I personally think that if you're rational, I don't care if you carry rocket-propelled grenades or whatever. It's your business. It's not the government's business.
Right. Well, if you're a sovereign and you practice your constitutional rights, you supersede tyranny, by the way. Like if I live in a neighborhood and I have an association and I have a land patent, that supersedes the association. When the government makes bad rulings that are against the Constitution and you exercise your rights under the Constitution wins every time. Even though they have the guns, that's what it's supposed to be, but you have to call them out on it. That's it. It's kind of like this immigration thing. We're all complaining about, these people coming in. Well, my idea is, most of these people, their countries have embassies all over the country, right? Well, send them to the embassies and let the embassies deal with them. I guarantee you start piling those people up, they're going to start doing something.
Right. Right? Just like in Mexico had to collaborate with Obama in order for these people to come in. What's the latest on that, John? What do you see?
What do I see regarding what again?
The immigration issue on our border, because that flood is growing and growing.
It's going to spin wildly out of control, possibly to the point where we have our president asking for United Nations assistance to help us in our time of need.
I think Congress isn't going to cough up the money. That's the first thing. My impression is whatever monies are coughed up are going to be a lot less than they, quote, need in order to fill this disaster. So, and we have three different categories. We have true refugees, and if they were, why put them on a death train, put them in air-conditioned buses, and get them up here safely so that the babies don't float across the Rio Grande River dead? Number two, we got MS-13 teenagers that have no right to try to get across the border. They're told they won't be rejected on radio and television in Nicaragua and Guatemala. And then the third thing is we're actually getting foreigners brought in here from Iran and elsewhere that are actually getting as Muslims, because Obama is trying to load up with all kinds of people that will look like people from Central and South America, but they're actually from the Middle East, and they're real terrorists. And I think we want maximum chaos when things go crazy, and they're trying to load up and create what I call a gruel class, a giant class of people, millions, that will be beholden to the government to providing them everything. That's what my suspicion is, and that's why they wanted to make a permanent gruel class, so the powers that be will be able to always rely on them geopolitically to maintain power.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I know that seems harsh for people, but I think we should take care of the babies, like the Pope says, but I think we also should be much more circumspect about these teenagers that are coming in here that have got tattoos that indicate they're part of a drug gang, and they should be sent off to like a military facility or prison or something to figure out what they are and contact their consulate to find out why are they here, why are they trying to be here. And then also we should be helping to clean up those countries. We say we want to get rid of the drugs problem. Send in special forces, Delta, drones, thwart operational ground-based robots, clean out the rat's nest. But we don't. We can go in and kill these guys really quickly and clean it out. We could get rid of all of the excruciating drug problem in these countries. It's not because the government is addicted to laundering the illegal drug money from these countries, just like Fast and Furious was giving weapon systems to our affiliate drug gangs in Central and South America. That's what the problem is. We have a corrupt government affiliating themselves with criminals.
Couldn't agree more, Doctor. Well, this is Liberty Man signing off.
Yeah, thank you, John. Amazing. And we'll be back on Monday with a Prepper Hour. Lots of questions. Thank you for calling in, Santiago. Great question. Again, less EMF is a lot of information. Of course, we're posting up more and more information. Go to visit thelibertyman.com for John's site, and site is homeland-defense4you.com. Spaceweather.com, we want to find out what's going on in space weather. And, of course, we post up lots of news about what's going on with Ebola. I posted up more today. It's exploding across Africa, and it's way out of control. And we're using no measures that I think are adequate to protect it from coming here.